students, this is Roshni from LearnoHub, a free learning platform where you can learn anything about math, science, social science, English, science experiments, everything for free at learnohub.com. So in today's video, this is the 7th video of the video series on how do organisms reproduce class 10th science. And what's our agenda for this video? We are going to learn about the human female reproductive system. We will also learn about the exact process of fertilization in humans and also discuss a bit about the processes of menstruation and menopause. So are we all ready to get started? Of course, let's get started. So now that we have got an idea about the human male reproductive system, let us talk about the reproductive system in females. So now we know that how the male germ cells are produced and how they enter the female body. Now let us say how are the female germ cells produced. So let us first understand the different parts of the female reproductive system. It consists of mainly a pair of ovaries. Ovaries are the most important part of the female reproductive system. So here you can see these are the two ovaries, 1 and 2. So ovaries are the places where the eggs are produced. Eggs are the female germ cells. So the eggs, or sometimes they are also known as ovum or ova. So these eggs or ovum are produced inside the ovaries. Then there is a fallopian tube. So here you can see this is the fallopian tube which starts from the ovary and connects it's somewhere here. So what is there? We will see. Next is uterus. So this is the uterus. Uterus is the place which actually holds the baby. You would have seen that in case of human beings when how reproduction takes place. First, this fertilization will happen. Now once a baby is created, the baby remains inside the womb of the mother for 9 months. So this is the place which actually keeps the baby for 9 months. So uterus is a bag-like structure which holds the baby. So this entire structure is the uterus. So the fallopian tube actually connects each ovary to the uterus. So that is why this is a fallopian tube. This is also the fallopian tube. Next is cervix. So here you can see the uterus ends up in cervix, and this cervix then opens to the exterior through vagina. So vagina is the opening outside, right? So as I said before also, like in females as they reach their teenage or when they reach their puberty, the menstrual cycle starts. So in menstrual cycle what happens? There is bleeding through the vagina. So this is the opening through which the bleeding happens every month during the menstrual cycle. So this vagina will go to the cervix. From the cervix will start the uterus, and then from the uterus on both sides will be the fallopian tube, and the fallopian tubes will be connected to ovaries on each side. Clear? Okay. So roughly this is the structure. Now let us look at the function of each part. So let us first talk about the ovaries. So let us first talk about the most important part, that is the ovaries. So there are two ovaries, one on each side of the uterus. So by now you know where is the uterus located, right? So this is the uterus. So on each side of uterus you have one ovary. So what is the purpose of ovary? They produce the female sex cell. The female sex cell is known as ovum, whose plural is ova. So sometimes it is also known as egg cell. So ovum or egg. So they produce the female sex cell. They also secrete the female hormones estrogen and progesterone. Like how in males you have the male hormone testosterone which is produced by the testes. Similarly, in case of females, these hormones estrogen and progesterone are produced by the ovaries, and these hormones are responsible for the secondary sexual characters in females. For example, the breast development and the onset of menstrual cycle, all these things are governed by these female hormones. Next is the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is also known as the oviduct. It exists in pairs. So fallopian tube also it exists in pairs. There is one fallopian tube here, another one here. So they originate from uterus and extend up to each ovary. So from uterus, one fallopian tube goes this side, the other one goes this side, connecting the ovaries. So what is the purpose of fallopian tube? They receive ovum from the ovary. So the ovary produces the ovum, fallopian tube takes the ovum out from the ovary. So that is its function. So that is why you see that the terminal part of the fallopian tube, that is this portion, is funnel shaped with finger-like projections. So here you have finger-like projections on the fallopian tube. So these projections actually pushes the ovum into the fallopian tube. So when the ovum is here, these projections will help the ovum to come out into the fallopian tube. Next is the uterus. It is a pear-shaped muscular hollow structure, as you can see in the picture. So this is the place where the fetus develops. Now you would have seen that sometimes we use different names. Sometimes we use the word zygote, sometimes we use the word embryo, sometimes we use the word fetus. So what are the difference between all of them? Now as soon as the fusion between the male and the female cell takes place, the one that is formed is a single celled zygote. Then that zygote undergo many number of divisions and form a multi-celled embryo. Now a matured embryo with certain features is known as fetus. So the fetus actually develops here. That means the baby actually remains here for 9 months. Then cervix, it is the narrow lower part of the uterus. So the terminal part of the uterus somewhere here. And the last one, vagina. It is a tube-like structure. Sperm discharge occurs here. It acts as birth canal. That means this is vagina, as I said. Now when the intercourse happens, what happens? The penis gets inserted into this vagina. So the penis enters here and then the penis secretes the sperms here. So this is the place where the sperms, through which the sperms enter inside the female body. This tube also acts as birth canal because when, as I said, the baby remains here and the baby remains here for 9 months. Now how does the baby come out? The baby comes out through this vagina. Right? So that is why it is also known as birth canal. Clear? So these are the different parts of the female reproductive system. So let us now see how are the female sex cells, that is the ova or the egg cells, are produced. So the female sex cells are known as ova or ova. Now ova are produced by epithelium in ovary. As I said, inside the ovary is present a lining of epithelium. So that epithelium produces the ovum or ova. Now can you imagine when this formation of ova starts in a female? Many of you might guess that maybe during puberty when the reproductive tissues start functioning. But no, it is not like that. The formation of ova actually starts in a female fetus even before birth. That means when a girl child is not even born, the girl child is still inside its mother's uterus, that time itself the formation of ova starts. So that means when a female child is born, at the time of birth, there are almost 2 to 3 lakhs of immature eggs lying inside its ovary. Just imagine. That is so interesting, right? So when a small baby is born, just at the time of birth, there are lakhs of immature eggs present inside the ovary. Now when do these eggs mature? They mature only when the female reaches the adolescence period. That means when the female reaches the puberty, when its menstrual cycle starts, during that time these eggs start getting matured. So what happens? Every month one mature egg gets released from the ovary. So that is how the production of egg happens. So this is how it takes place. So here you can see, as I said just now, that there are so many, not only one egg, there are several ova which are present inside this ovary. But after reaching puberty, every month one egg becomes matured and that egg will be released out of the ovary. So this release of egg This release of egg or ovum from the ovary is known as ovulation. So every month, one matured egg will get released from the ovary. Now the funnel-shaped end of the fallopian tube with small projections will push the egg out of the ovary. This release of egg from ovary is known as ovulation. So it is a very important process. Clear? So now these immature eggs start. How do these immature eggs mature? Now this maturation process takes place under the influence of hormones which are controlled by the pituitary gland. We have spoken about pituitary gland in our previous lesson. It is the master gland of the body. It controls the secretion of sex hormones by the other glands. So these pituitary gland actually helps in the maturation of these immature eggs present inside the ovary. So it is seen that one matured egg is released from either of the ovaries at every 28 days. So this process of ovulation will happen every 28 days. So that means every 28 days, one ovum is released. So every 28 days, ovulation will take place inside the body of a female. So this is how female sex cells will be produced. Clear? So now we know how the male cells are produced. Now we know how the female cells are produced. So now what we are yet to study, how the fusion between the male sex cell and the female sex cell actually takes place. So this is how a female sex cell looks like. This is how an ovum looks like. So let us now talk about fertilization. Fertilization is an internal process. Fertilization is nothing but the process of fusion between the male sex cell and the female sex cell. That is, in case of human beings, it is the fusion between the sperm and the ovum. So it is an internal process because everything happens internally, and this process takes place inside the body of the female. So where exactly inside the body of the female? It occurs in the fallopian tube. Now, as I said, by the process of ovulation, a matured egg is released and it remains in the fallopian tube somewhere here. And we have already seen how sperms are produced. So the sperms are produced and the sperms get ejaculated in the vagina of the female. So these sperms also reach from vagina to the fallopian tube. And in the fallopian tube, the actual fusion takes place. So let us look at the process of fertilization. So here in this picture, I have focused only on the fallopian tube part. So ovum comes from ovary to the fallopian tube, as I mentioned before also. So here you can see the ovum is coming out from the ovary to the fallopian tube. Now sperms enter through the vagina. Now the sperms first enter through the vagina during intercourse, and they also reach the fallopian tube. So here you can see the sperms have also reached the fallopian tube. Now the sperms are motile, so the sperms are capable of moving. So now the sperm enters the egg. So here you can see the sperm enters the egg. Now the moment the sperm enters the egg, the fusion of the nucleus of the sperm and the ovum takes place. So the sperm contains a nucleus, the ovum also contains the nucleus. So as soon as the sperm enters inside the ovum, both the nucleus of the sperm and the ovum, they fuse together, they combine together. So this fusion is known as fertilization. So the fusion of nucleus of sperm and ovum is termed as fertilization. And this fertilization results in the formation of a new organism. So now we will see what is the result of this fertilization. Right? Now, another question is that just now I told you that one matured egg gets released from the ovary every 28 days. Now the question is that unfertilized egg, before the egg has met the sperm, so will that egg remain alive forever? Will the egg remain alive for the next 28 days as long as the next egg doesn't get released? No, it is not like that. The lifespan of an egg is very, very small. From the time the egg got released from the ovary, it will remain alive only for 24 hours, just 24 hours. So if a sperm comes and fertilize it within this 24 hours, only then fertilization will happen. If the ovum doesn't meet any sperm in the 24 hours, then what will happen to the ovum? The ovum will degenerate itself. So it is a very interesting fact. There are so many sperms which get released inside the body of the human male. But out of those so many sperms, only one sperm is enough to fertilize the egg. But this egg will remain alive only for 24 hours. So only within that time, only those 24 hours, a fertilization had to take place. Only then reproduction will actually happen. Right? So it is a matter of chance that whether the ovum will meet the sperm in those 24 hours or not. So then if it meets the sperm will enter inside the ovum and the nucleus of the sperm will fuse with the nucleus of the ovum, and we say that fertilization has taken place. So this is how fertilization happens. Now what is the result of fertilization? Now once the nucleus of the sperm fuse with the nucleus of the ovum, what is formed? The result is that a single-celled zygote is formed. So this is the result of fertilization. So first a zygote is formed, then this zygote will undergo repeated divisions. So this is how it happens. So this fusion will happen, it results in the formation of a zygote. So this is the zygote. Now this zygote will keep on dividing repeatedly. So more and more division, so more number of cells inside, right? So by repeated division, the zygote will form an embryo. So that zygote becomes an embryo after many divisions. So here in this picture you can see the fertilization happened, so a zygote is formed here. Now this zygote will undergo more divisions, again further divisions, and then this embryo will descend into the uterus. It will start moving gradually towards the uterus because finally the baby has to implant itself in the uterus. So the embryo descends into uterus in 4 to 5 days. So the process started here. Fertilization started here. So from here till here, it takes around 4 to 5 days for this entire process. Right? So now once the embryo starts getting inside the uterus, it finally implants it with the wall of the uterus. So you can see that this embryo will plant itself. It has formed some specialized tissue-like structure with the wall of the uterus, and that is how it implants itself here. And then the embryo keeps on growing and gradually it becomes a fetus. And the fetus keeps on growing till 9 months, and after 9 months it is born as a baby. Right? So now you know the difference between a zygote, embryo and fetus. Zygote after many divisions gets implanted in the uterus, and that is known as embryo. And embryo in its advanced stages of development is known as a fetus. So we normally use the term fetus for an advanced embryo. So now the question is that, okay, fine, after so many divisions, the fetus or the embryo gets implanted in the uterus. But how does that fetus receive nutrition? Who provides food and all other nutrition for the growth of that embryo? So let us see what happens about that. Now there is a specialized structure called placenta, which is formed in 8 to 9 days. As I said, in 4 to 5 days, the embryo starts moving towards the uterus. So in a total of 8 to 9 days, a specialized structure is formed that is called placenta. So this structure actually helps in providing nutrition to the embryo. It is a structure formed by specialized tissues of fetus and uterine wall of mother. Uterine wall means the wall of the uterus. So here you can see, this picture will clearly show it. So this is how the baby or the fetus gets implanted in the uterus. So if you see, some tissues of the fetus and some tissues of the uterine wall of mother, they both join together to form this structure called placenta. Now how this structure helps in providing nutrition to the embryo? Now all the nutrients and good things come into the fetus from the mother's blood through this placenta, because this placenta is a connection between the mother's body and the fetus body. So it acts as a connection between the two. So all good things come into the fetus from the mother's blood through placenta. Similarly, all waste materials go out from the fetus into the mother's blood through the placenta, because even the fetus is also a new living organism now. So the different life processes which we generally talk about, maybe digestion or respiration, so everything is happening inside the fetus as well. So as a result, excretion is also taking place. So there are some waste materials which need to be thrown out. So where will the fetus throw out the waste materials? So those waste materials are also thrown to the placenta, and through the placenta it reaches the mother's blood, and from the mother's blood it is excreted out through the excretory system of the mother. So placenta acts as a link between the fetus and the mother. Now there is another thing which actually connects the placenta with the fetus, that is called umbilical cord. There is a tube-like structure which is connected from the navel of the fetus to the placenta. So here you can see there is this thread-like structure, a red-blue colored thread-like structure you can see here. Right here you see this structure. So this structure starts from the navel of this fetus and it connects to the placenta. So this tube-like structure actually acts as a connection between the fetus and the placenta. So the total development of the baby takes place in around 9 months, and baby gets all its nutrients from the mother's body. So that is why it is said that when a woman is carrying, when a lady is pregnant, that means when she is carrying a baby inside her uterus, she should get a proper diet. She should eat properly, because whatever food she eats, a part of the food goes to the baby as well through the placenta. So we can say that the link between the fetus and the mother is somewhat like this. If this is the fetus, so the fetus has an umbilical cord which connects it to the placenta, and the placenta connects it to the uterine wall of mother. So that is how the mother and the baby are connected to each other for the transfer of nutrients to the baby and for the transfer of wastes to the mother bloods. So this is how an embryo gets implanted in the uterus of a female and it gets nutrition. Now normally in human beings the placenta is a flat round structure. So if you look at a placenta, it will be, the shape is quite round and it is a flat structure. So this was about how a baby gets implanted. There can be another scenario. So this was the scenario when the ovary releases one egg, that is ovulation takes place, and within 24 hours a sperm comes and enters into the ovum and fertilization takes place. So that is the scenario which we had discussed now. Now what would happen if the egg is not fertilized? Let us suppose the ovary released one mature egg. So one matured egg will come into the fallopian tube. But let us suppose that unfortunately there is no sperm who actually meets this ovum in 24 hours, because we know that lifespan of an unfertilized egg is only 24 hours. So if fertilization has to take place, then a sperm should enter inside the ovum within those 24 hours. Now what happens if this doesn't happen? So in that case, what will happen to the egg? So in that case, what happens? Let's see. So we already saw that an egg is released from either of the ovaries every 28 days. So every 28 days, there is one egg which is released. Okay. We also know that this unfertilized egg will remain alive only for 24 hours after ovulation. That means it needs to be fertilized by the sperm within 24 hours. Now let us suppose that the sperm did not fertilize it within 24 hours. So what will happen? Now forget about the fact whether the sperm fertilized it or not. Now as soon as this ovulation takes place, as soon as a matured egg is released from the ovary, what happens to the uterus? Now the uterus gets to know that okay, the egg is released from the ovary. So the uterus also plans itself. The uterus also prepares itself. Uterus also knows that now the egg has been released, so the egg will remain alive for 24 hours. So maybe a sperm will come and it will fertilize the egg. So if a sperm fertilizes the egg, then what will happen? A zygote will be formed. If a zygote is formed, then what will happen? In 4 to 5 days, the zygote will become an embryo, and that embryo will come to the uterus. So uterus should also prepare itself so that it can receive the embryo, right? Because once the embryo comes to the uterus, it is going to stay in the uterus for 9 months. So the uterus also does some preparations to receive the fetus. So what kind of preparation does it do? Now there is an inner lining of the uterus. So if you look at this picture, the orange colored structure here is the inner lining of the uterus. So this inner lining of the uterus is known as endometrium. So this is the inner lining of uterus. So this inner lining thickens. Thickens means now the uterus knows that once the fetus comes inside me, it is going to stay here for 9 months. So I need to take proper care of that fetus. So how do I need to take proper care? By giving it full protection, by giving it full nutrition, right? And for all those things, what it does, the inner lining of the uterus thickens, because if it thickens, it will give a cushiony feeling to the baby. At the same time, it gets richly supplied with blood, because blood of the mother's body contain all the nutrients, so that that blood can give the nutrients to that embryo, so that the embryo can further help the embryo to grow in a nice way. So this is the preparation which is done by the uterus. But now let us suppose that no fertilization takes place. Let us suppose that even though this egg was released by the ovary, but there was no sperm who could actually fuse it or who could actually fertilize it within 24 hours. So in that case, no fertilization took place. Now if no fertilization took place, that means no zygote is formed, because no fertilization had taken place. Now what will happen to the egg? The egg will degenerate itself. So the egg will vanish. Now what happens to the uterus? Uterus did so much of preparation. The uterus thickened its endometrium, which is now fully vascular, that means which is fully supplied with blood vessels. Now what will happen to that endometrium? Now this thick endometrium is of no use, right? So now what will happen? The endometrium will break. So this thickness of the endometrium will break off. So when it breaks, what happens? It was made up of blood. The thickness was due to the more supply of blood. Now when it breaks, this blood has to flow somewhere. So where will it flow? It has to go outside the body, because that blood is useless now. Because if it doesn't break, what will happen? Again, after 28 days, a new egg will be released. So again, that time the uterus will thicken the endometrium all the more. So that means the endometrium will keep on becoming thick. So much of blood will get accumulated on the inner wall of the uterus. So there will be hardly any space left for the baby, right? So that is why as soon as the uterus get to know that no fertilization had taken place and no fetus is going to come to me, the endometrium breaks, and the blood which was actually making it thick, that blood will be thrown out through the vagina. So it is excreted in the form of bleeding through vagina. So this bleeding, which happens every month, is known as menstruation, and this is what we call as the menstrual cycle, because every 28 days a new egg is released by the ovary, and this menstruation also happens every 28 days. So we will look at the calculation of dates in the next slide. So for now you understood why this bleeding happens every month. That's because every month when an egg is released by the ovary, it waits for 24 hours for a sperm. So during that time, the uterus also prepares itself in order to receive the fetus. So how it prepares itself? By thickening its endometrium. Now when no fertilization happens, then no zygote is formed, so no fetus comes to the uterus. So this thickened endometrium becomes a waste. So the endometrium breaks and it comes out of the body in the form of bleeding through the vagina. and this results in this process of menstruation. So let us now talk about the sexual cycle in female. So sexual cycle in female is nothing but the menstrual cycle which happens every month. Approximately at an interval of some 28 days. So monthly once every female undergoes this menstrual cycle wherein there is bleeding from her vagina for some 3 to 5 days. So it is the process of bleeding through vagina due to breakage of endometrium. This process is known as menstruation. So now you understand that when I say that as soon as a female reaches the age of puberty, as soon as she reaches adolescence, the menstrual cycle starts. So menstrual cycle starts means your body tells you that when will the menstrual cycle starts? Only after ovulation. If an egg has been released by the ovary, only after that menstruation will happen, because they are related. When an egg gets released from the ovary, then the uterus prepares itself, then the uterus will wait for some time for the fetus to come. When the fetus doesn't come, then the wall of the uterus will break and menstruation will take place. So that means when the menstruation happens for the first time for a girl, then it is an indication to the girl that now your reproductive organs have matured. Your ovary have got matured eggs now, and that is what the first matured egg has been released from your ovary. So that is the indication. When a girl has the first menstruation, it means the first matured egg from your ovary has been released. Now once the first matured egg has been released, that means every 28 days a new matured egg will be released from the ovary. Right? So that is the concept of menstruation. Now this occurs every 28 days. Now as I said, since ovulation occurs every 28 days, that is why menstruation also occurs every 28 days. Now how is the date of ovulation related to the date of menstruation? We will look at that now. Let us now see how is the date of ovulation and the date of menstruation related to each other. So this menstrual cycle generally lasts for 2 to 6 days. For some female it lasts for 3 days, for somebody it lasts for 5 days, but it ranges in this 2 to 6 days. It occurs around 14 days post ovulation. That means the time when ovulation takes place. After 14 days of that, this menstruation happens. So let us see how are the time of ovulation and the time of menstruation related to each other. Now let us suppose ovulation takes place. Now what happens when ovulation takes place? A matured egg is released from the ovary. So this egg is released into the fallopian tube. Now there are two possibilities that can happen. One possibility is that the egg gets fertilized. That means a sperm comes and fertilizes the egg within 24 hours, because that egg will be alive for 24 hours. Now what will happen if the egg gets fertilized? Zygote will be formed. After that, what will happen? In another 4 to 5 days, the zygote will undergo repeated divisions by which it will form an embryo, and this embryo will descend into the uterus. So in a period of 5 to 6 days, it will descend into the uterus, and then gradually a placenta will be formed, and then the embryo will gradually get converted into a fetus. Right? So that is the process when the egg gets fertilized. Now let us suppose that if no fertilization happens. In that case, what will happen? Now when no fertilization is happened, what happens to the uterus? The uterus is waiting. Uterus is waiting for what? It is waiting for the embryo, because in this case, how much time after, when the fertilization took place, after that in 5 to 6 days, the uterus received the embryo. So here also the uterus first waits, because anyways from the date of ovulation, it takes some 5 to 6 days for the embryo to reach the uterus. So the uterus is waiting. Now, even after 5 to 6 days, the uterus doesn't get the embryo. So the uterus thinks that, okay, maybe I'll get it tomorrow. So he waits. So the uterus waits for some more time. So finally it is seen that the uterus waits for around 14 days. Now, when till 14th day also the uterus doesn't receive a fetus, then what happens? The endometrium breaks. So bleeding happens, and that is known as menstruation. So that is how this menstruation happens 14 days after the date of ovulation. Right? So because whenever the ovulation takes place, if fertilization takes place, then the uterus gets the embryo in 5 to 6 days. And if fertilization doesn't take place, the uterus waits for the embryo for 14 days. If it doesn't get any embryos till 14th day, then it breaks the wall of the endometrium and the bleeding takes place through the vagina, and that is known as menstruation. So I hope that this concept of menstrual cycle is clear to you now, that why menstruation happens. Okay, let us now talk about a small term called menopause. Now, does that mean that this process of reproduction can happen anytime in life? As I said, the process of reproduction will start only at a certain age. So for guys, that age is around 13 to 14 years. For girls, that age is around 11 to 13 years. So that reproduction process is possible only for people who have attained puberty. Now, what is the maximum limit for reproduction? Can an old man of 80 years old and a woman of 75 years old, can they both reproduce? Let us see what happens. Now, menstrual cycle in a woman continues till 45 to 55 years of age, post which ovary becomes dormant. That means the ovary of any female will remain active only till 55 years of age. That means a woman's ovary becomes active. When will the ovary starts producing mature eggs? When the woman is in the teenage, maybe around 13 years old. And the ovary will be active till the woman is 45 to 55 years of age. After that, the ovary is not going to produce any eggs. So that means only this much duration is the time period when the woman is capable of reproduction. After that, once menstruation stops, now once the ovary stops producing eggs, that means no ovulation will take place. Now, once the eggs are not produced, that means no menstruation will take place, because only when the eggs are produced, the uterus thickens its wall. So when no eggs will be produced, there will be no thickening of the uterus wall, there will be no menstruation. So the female will no more be capable of reproducing. So this will denote, so this stopping of the menstrual cycle is known as menopause. Pause means stop. So this is known as menopause. Now, once menopause occurs for a woman, that woman becomes incapable of reproduction. So that denotes the end of reproductive cycle for that female. Right? So with this, I think I have reached towards the end of sexual reproduction in human beings, and I hope that I have been able to explain you how reproduction occurs in human beings, what are the different sexual cycles that happen in a female.
I hope you found this entire series on reproduction or how do organisms reproduce useful. If you have a feedback to share, do let us know in the comment section. If you really like the video, you should share it with your friends so that they can enjoy the video too. I will see you all very soon with a new video, with a new topic. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.